One man, one idea changed football forever. Between 2008 and 2023, Pep Guardiola didn't just win trophies. He built a tactical language that every coach on the planet has spent the last 15 years trying to learn, copy, or defend against. He took a football pitch, 22 players, one ball, and 90 minutes, and he found a way to make the game feel inevitable. Like every pass was already pre-planned, like every movement was already decided, like every goal was never in doubt before it even happened. His teams didn't just react to football, they shaped it. And then, the world pushed back. Philosophy that has once conquered Spanish football with Barcelona, that had demolished the Premier League with Manchester City, that made football almost look like art, that system started to crack. In this video, we'll go on a journey into Pep Guardiola's mind and flip through the pages of his playbook. You'll understand his philosophy and how it all started. While no football tactical philosophy is perfect, you see the evolution that made Guardiola's system unstoppable and the vulnerabilities that exposed his system. The goal of this video is not to show you Pep Guardiola's ultimate tactic, because I don't think he even has one. It's to show you how Pep Guardiola thinks. This way, you start making tactical decisions with the same mindset that guides one of the greatest football managers of all time. Most football fans, we watch the game, and even us that play football manager, we copy tactics that we find online. But most people who love football never really stop to ask, why does this system work? If you leave this video now, you keep watching football the same way you always have, and you probably still play football manager saves the same way you always do with tactics that you get from somewhere. You keep seeing the game on the surface, that's just the goals, the results and the highlights, but you keep missing everything underneath. So don't just take this as a football manager guide. It's a story of a tactical genius. We'll look at his greatest triumph, his deepest struggle, and the new idea that he's currently building right now, quietly and obsessively, that might go ahead to change football once again. Between 2008 and 2012 at FC Barcelona, Pep Guardiola proved to the entire world that even before a player sets foot on the training pitch, even before a tactic board is drawn, even before the team sheet is even announced, a manager has the power to decide a football match. This is not just a random romantic idea, it's the foundation of Pep Guardiola's philosophy. While other managers react to what the opponents are doing, Pep Guardiola is 3 moves ahead even before the referee has blown the first whistle. And the extraordinary thing is, the system he built wasn't that complicated, it was just deeply understood. What Guardiola installed at Barcelona was called juego de posición, what we know as positional play. And at its core, it answers one question that every footballer and every coach and every team eventually has to face. What do you do before the moment arrives? Pep Guardiola built a system where the players had already decided before the pass was even made. Every player knew where to be. Every movement created space for someone else. Every pass had a destination 2 passes ahead of where the ball was actually going to be. Think about what this means. 11 players moving as one hive mind. Not because they were told where to run to in that exact moment, but because they had internalized a set of principles so deeply that the right movement became instinctive. This is not just a football idea, it is the core of Pep Guardiola's philosophy. And the results at Barcelona were unlike anything football had ever seen before. Barcelona under Pep Guardiola didn't just dominate matches, they made the game look inevitable, like the goal was never in doubt. The opponent was always playing a different sport. 72% average possession across their 2010-2011 Champions League campaign, but the stats alone doesn't just capture how devastating the system was. Barcelona always knew what they were going to do next, and their opponents never did. The areas Guardiola targeted were the half spaces, channels that sit between the fullback and the centre-back on either side of the pitch. These zones are the most dangerous real estate on the football pitch, and most teams leave them completely unguarded, well, at the time, because it wasn't really obvious. They were not the wide areas where the fullbacks would cover, they were not the central areas where the centre-backs would cover. These spaces sat in between the two of them, so there wasn't really a player designated to cover that area. Pep Guardiola saw what other managers ignored, and he built an entire system around exploiting that space. See if you can spot the core principle behind Pep Guardiola's tactical decisions at Barcelona. He primarily set his Barcelona team up in a 4-3-3, but not the conventional way we are used to. In Guardiola's team, the 2 fullbacks had slightly different roles. Dani Alves on the right was an adventurous attacking wingback, while Eric Abidal was a more defensive supporting fullback, much like a ball-playing defender playing at left back. This causes massive problems for the opponents at the time, as these 2 players supported and contributed the attack. They got into positions that the opponent couldn't really deal with. While Dani Alves and Abidal supported the team's build-up, Pep Guardiola also deployed the half-back role to offer extra defensive protection. This player was also crucial to the build-up, giving the team numerical superiority when they were playing out from the back. However, Pep Guardiola's most radical decision was saving his most radical idea for the most important player, Lionel Messi. Pep took Messi, the most natural goal scorer and creative player in the world at the time. Instead of playing him high and keeping him waiting for the ball all the time, Messi dropped into space between the opposition's midfield and defense, drawing centre-backs out of position, creating gaps and also arriving late into spaces that normally you wouldn't expect to see him in. This role is what we have come to know as the false nine. Were you able to spot the core principles behind these decisions? If you did, congratulations. If you didn't, let me give you a hint. Pep didn't try to fit his players into a preferred role. He identified the strengths of each player and built a system that amplifies those strengths. And he didn't just stop there. Except Sergio Busquets and Eric Abidal, or maybe Zlatan Ibrahimovic at the time, Barcelona were not the tallest bunch of players. So rather than try to win the ball in the air or defend deep in numbers, Pep Guardiola's Barcelona kept the ball on the ground with one-touch passing and also maintained a very high defensive line. On the 28th of May 2011 at Wembley, Barcelona completed the masterclass against Manchester United and Sir Alex Ferguson, the most successful football club and manager at the time. Barcelona beat Manchester United 3-1 at Wembley. They outfoxed Manchester United from the very first minute to the last. Sir Alex Ferguson said afterwards, "They were the best team that we ever faced." When you see Pep Guardiola, you're looking at someone who has a vision, a complete total vision of how the game should be played, and then this obsession is combined with patience and precision to actually make the world see it. It's almost like a way of thinking. And the most fascinating thing about this story is that Pep wasn't done yet. The real test of any great idea is how long it survives without the genius who invented it. When Pep Guardiola left in 2012, he took everything with him. The philosophy, the principles, the obsession with space and movement and positional dominance. Everything except the one player the entire system had been quietly built around, Lionel Messi. Most football analysts and even rival managers were watching to see what was going to happen next. Could the system, our Pep Guardiola, survive without Lionel Messi? The inverted wingback, a right back or left back with superior technical ability who is capable of playing in the heart of midfield as a central pivot. Again, this verifies Pep's ability to spot talent that is probably underutilized in a preferred role. Pep started to ask a different question entirely. What if the system itself became the most important player on the pitch? He began building a structure so precise, so disciplined, so mathematically thought through that any player who understood it deeply could make it even devastating. The most visible evolution is what he did with the fullbacks. He turned them into inverted wingbacks. Instead of asking them to stay out wide and provide crosses, Pep Guardiola pulled them inside, into midfield and into those half spaces. He took what worked at Bayern Munich and amplified it at Manchester City. Suddenly, City had 6 players in midfield during the build-up phase, 6 players controlling the center of the pitch, and 6 players suffocating the opposition's press before it even started. The opponent's midfield was constantly outnumbered, constantly chasing shadows, and constantly a half second too late. And then there was a striker problem. At Barcelona, the false nine had Lionel Messi, the player that was so gifted in the role that he went on to score over 50 goals in the season. At Manchester City, Guardiola went even further. There were periods and even entire seasons where Manchester City played without a recognized striker. Instead of the normal centre forward occupying the opposition and the centre backs, this space was left empty deliberately. And into that empty space, from Man City players arrived into the box in waves. They were late and unpredictable and very impossible to track. The opponent's centre back usually had no one to mark. And that uncertainty, that constant searching for the threat, it was more paralyzing than any traditional centre forward could be. While the strikerless system dominated the Premier League, it struggled in Europe. 12 years after winning the second UEFA Champions League trophy with Barcelona, Pep Guardiola failed to win the trophy with any other club. Despite evolving tactically to dominate league football, the rumours started to surface that he wasn't good enough to win the Champions League. In the summer of 2022, Pep Guardiola did the unthinkable. Manchester City signed the best centre-forward in the world, Erling Haaland. The Norwegian is technically different from Lionel Messi. He's not a playmaker, false nine type player that we're normally familiar with Pep systems. He's a classic, powerful target forward with a killer finishing instinct of a goal poacher, a classic number 9. They crossed the ball a lot more often and they scored lots of goals from headers. City evolved defensively, preferring to sit in a low block in big games and hit teams on the counter-attack. By the end of the season, Manchester City won the UEFA Champions League for the first time in the club's history. And for Pep, it finally broke the jinx of winning the trophy without Lionel Messi or Barcelona. But every system, no matter how brilliant, has a vulnerability. And the higher you build something, the more exposed you are when the foundations start to crack. There is a moment in the story of every great system, a moment where the results stop reflecting the quality of the idea, where the wins become harder and the performances become inconsistent, where opponents who used to look helpless against you start looking comfortable. For Manchester City, that moment arrived in 2024. Between November 2024 and February 2025, Man City went on a worse run of games under Pep Guardiola's entire managerial career, winless in 18 matches across all competitions. 18. For a team that has spent years making the rest of English football feel ordinary, this wasn't just a bad run of form. This felt like something had completely broken. The tactical explanation is important to understand, because it tells you something profound about how the great systems carry their seeds of their own vulnerability. Guardiola's positional play depends on three things working simultaneously: intensity of the press, precision in possession, and pace across the defensive line. When all these three are operating effectively, the system is almost undefeatable. But when one of them deteriorates, the other two become exposed. City's squad had aged. Key players like Kevin De Bruyne, who had been the athletic engine of the press, the legs that made the high line survivable, they were either injured or declining. Technical players like Riyad Mahrez also left the club after winning the Champions League, and the season-ending injury to Rodri made matters worse for Pep Guardiola's side. Opponents had spent years studying how to defend against Pep Guardiola's Man City. They knew that if they could bypass the press quickly with one direct pass, one moment of quality, City's defensive line was dangerously high and could easily be exposed. The space behind that line was enormous, and now for the first time in years, teams had the belief that they could go behind it. That's the thing about a system that's built on collective intensity. The moment one player gives 90% instead of 100%, the whole structure could crumble. You can't hide in positional play. It demands everything from everyone every single minute. Pep Guardiola didn't hide from it though. In press conferences, Guardiola stood in front of the cameras and said what most managers would never publicly admit, that he was searching and he was trying to find solutions, and the answers weren't obvious yet. He was struggling. And here's what is remarkable about that. Lesser mind would have blamed the players, or blamed the fixture list, or blamed the injuries. Pep Guardiola looked at his own system, the system that he has spent his entire career building and refining, and asked whether he needed to evolve. And quietly, without announcement, without any fanfare, he began making changes. A slightly deeper defensive line, he adjusted the pressing triggers to a more pragmatic approach, something that is different from the possession shape that he was used to. However, he did not completely abandon his philosophy. Just made a refinement to it, because that is what genuine great thinkers do when the world pushes back against their own ideas. They adjust. They don't just defend their ideas blindly. They ask, what does this idea need to become next? The decline of Manchester City is not the end of this story. It is the most intrusive chapter of it. Despite having a difficult few years, Manchester City are still in the conversation for the Premier League title. They are still relevant. So if you were to build the ultimate Pep Guardiola tactic on Football Manager, what would it look like? What formations would you use? What rules would be there? And what team instructions would be more consistent? I'm not going to give you a tactic to download. I'm going to show you how to think about it, because a tactic you understand will outperform any tactic that you download. We'll start with the shape. As much as I love the 4-3-3, Pep Guardiola doesn't rely on this formation all the time. Neither should you. There's nothing wrong with the formation itself, you just need to think bigger than using just one formation. A 4-2-3-1 is also a decent option to consider for a starting base. A 3-5-2 and a 3-2-5 are also very good positional formations. Now the player roles will determine the player positions in possession, so overthinking the formation is not really necessary anyway. Mentality wise, you can stick to a positive mentality and play a high defensive line. This is the Barcelona blueprint of course, and it's still the most faithful foundation for Pep Guardiola's system. However, in big games, be prepared to sit a little deeper and play with some cautious mentality or balanced mentality towards the ending of games. Like I mentioned before, the formation really means nothing. The roles you assign to each position are more important. In a high defensive line system, your goalkeeper is your last defender. He needs to be comfortable with the ball at his feet and quick enough to sweep in behind when the line is beaten. A standard goalkeeper will get you killed in this system. so the pseudo keeper is non-negotiable. For your defenders, ball-playing defenders are key. Your defenders are the first line of attack during the build-up phase. They need to be comfortable with the ball at their feet, either to carry the ball out of defense or to bypass the press by playing out of defense. Positional play begins at the back. Your centre-backs need to be the first passers in every build-up sequence, picking passes into midfield calmly under pressure. If your centre-backs panic or go long, the entire system collapses from the first touch. For the fullbacks, you have freedom to use any fullback role available in the game. However, if you're on Football Manager 24 or older versions of the game, avoid using roles like the fullback on defend or the no-nonsense fullback. Remember, you need to have the right players with good technical ability to play in these roles. To recreate the Cancelo rule, use the inverted wingback. This is the player who tucks inside into midfield during the build-up phase, creating that numerical overload in central areas that we talked about earlier. When you use an inverted wingback on one side and an attacking wingback on the other side, it creates an asymmetry. Here's what asymmetry looks like. When your inverted wingback tucks inside, your striker or winger on that side pushes wider to fill the space he vacated. The opponent's fullback has to decide whether to follow the winger or to track the inverted wingback that is now inside. Either decision leaves someone free. In midfield, this is where the system either dominates or disintegrates. Pep Guardiola's midfield has always had three distinct functions operating simultaneously: a recycler, a ball progressor, and an infiltrator. In Football Manager terms, you can recreate that somehow. For the recycler, you need a defensive midfielder. You can also add some creativity with this role by using a halfback, but the player's job here is to protect the defense and recycle possession. What about the deep line playmaker? From my research and observation, you can use a deep line playmaker, but Rodri, at the heart of Manchester City's midfield, is a slightly more defensive player. Roles like deep line playmaker and regista are creative roles that are drawn towards the ball, or at least they go close enough to the action in order to receive possession. You want a player that will stay in the pivot and not be drawn out of position too much. For attributes, you want strong players with great first touch, balance and ball control. In central midfield, you need movement. Now I think about it, Andres Iniesta during his prime era played often on the left-hand side and slightly to one side, like a mezzala. He, to me, is one of the first half-space playmakers that I've ever seen. If you're still on the older versions of the game, you can use a mezzala. This will be your half-space infiltrator. This player makes those late diagonal runs into the channels that we identified earlier as Barcelona's dangerous weapon. However, in FM26, you want to use a channel midfielder, a midfield playmaker, or an advanced playmaker role in that central midfield position with a protector behind them. These roles will work well to link defense and attack. Together, these midfield combinations create constant movement through the most dangerous areas of the pitch without leaving the team structurally exposed. In attack, you have to decide whether you want to play a creative false nine striker or a traditional centre forward. Pep Guardiola has had tremendous success with both, so it depends on the sort of player that you have as a striker in your team and how you can build the team around them to amplify their strengths. For the false nine type of player instructions really help here. You can add the roam from position instruction to your striker. When it works, it's devastating. The centre backs follow him, the space opens up behind your position's defense, and your midfielders and wide players can exploit that space. But, and this is really crucial, it only works if your central midfielders have the movement and intelligence to exploit the space created by the false nine. This means that your players need to have high attributes for decision making, off the ball and anticipation. If those numbers aren't really there, your false nine is just going to create a lot of space that nobody is going to exploit. For the classic number 9, you want to play a centre forward or a target forward. On previous versions of Football Manager, an advanced forward and a complete forward is highly recommended. The classic number 9 pins the centre backs, they initiate the press from the front, and they also give your midfielders a clear reference point in which to build attacks. Although they are less aesthetically pleasing than the false 9, they are significantly more reliable across a full season. For the wide players, this is where you can get super creative. The textbook thing to do would be to play your left-footed players on the right-hand side and ask them to cut inside. But throw away that textbook for a bit and do whatever feels right in the match. Look at your player attributes, and if you do not have the inside forwards or the inverted wingers in your team, you can always play a traditional winger or a wide forward. The beauty of the inside forward is that they are players who cut inside onto their stronger foot, often occupying the half spaces from wider positions. They are not like crossing wingers, but they're very creative. So you can think of them like wide playmakers. It's kind of like Grealish when he was at Manchester City. However, if you don't have inside forwards, you can always use the wide winger. Player roles are only half the picture. Your team instructions are what breeds Pep Guardiola's philosophy into your system. Here are the non-negotiables. In possession, you're going to need a high defensive line, and of course, you can keep the tempo either normal or high or fairly low tempo. This will depend on the match. In order to have a lot more control of games, you can play with low tempo. However, if you want to dismantle the opposition quickly, you can use high tempo. You also encourage your team to keep the passing short and ask them to also play out of defense. And in the final third, you want to ask your team to walk the ball into the box. However, be careful with this. If you're walking the ball into the box, you need to know that your team is going to be a bit more patient in possession and they're not going to play a lot of crosses. So in case you have a tall center forward, remember to take off the walk the ball into the box instruction, allowing your team to also experiment with crossing. Out of possession, you want to press high with more offensive intensity and also prevent the short goalkeeper distribution when the opponent's goalkeeper has the ball. When you lose possession, you will want to play with the counter press, forcing your players to try to win the ball back immediately after they've lost it, and if they don't win it back, they will resort into their defensive shape. The best football tactics don't just react to the game, they tend to control it, and that is by amplifying the strength of your team and trying to maximize the weaknesses of your opponents. This is the governing principle behind Pep Guardiola's philosophy. Now, if this video got you thinking about how tactical systems work at the highest level, I want to show you something that will genuinely surprise you. On this channel, we take it upon ourselves to share tactical knowledge from real-world managers and how to implement them in Football Manager. If you enjoy that type of content, then you'll like to know that something quite extraordinary has been happening in Dutch Eredivisie. NEC Nijmegen, a club from the city of Nijmegen in Netherlands, are playing a brand of football that is turning the Eredivisie upside down. They're not Ajax, they're not like PSV, they're not like Feyenoord, they're a mid-table club and their tactical system is unlike anything that has ever been played before in the Netherlands. And when you understand how it works, you will see Dutch football completely differently. NEC Nijmegen were second in the Dutch Eredivisie as at last month and they won 6 away games out of their 10 most recent games. So what tactic are they using and how are they able to dominate the Dutch league with it? Find out in this video.